Woman was talking to her 5-ish year old son on the LRT, explaining that murder is very, very bad. Then she asks him what the worst thing in the world is, expecting him to say murder. He paused in thought, and then replied, people. What strangely insightful things have you heard young kids say? My 5-year-old daughter asked how our pregnant neighbor's baby was going to get out, and I gave her a brief, but factual, explanation. She was surprised that something so big could pop out of someplace so small, and I confirmed her suspicion that childbirth, including hers, was painful. She shook her head sympathetically and said, well, it's too bad babies don't come out your butt, because yours is so big it wouldn't hurt at all. My daughter, at age 2, looks around the dinner table and says, we all look different, but we all like mac and cheese. This should be on a wall somewhere at the UN. A little late to the thread, but I have a good one. My nephew was 3 at the time and was riding in the back of the car to my grandmother's funeral. She had died after being too weak and overweight to move well, and had just recently gone into a care facility. My brother was starting to cover the subject of death and what the event was about. He chose to mention heaven, but said basically no one knows for sure where we go when we die. When my brother asked if he had any questions, he asked more or less, will she bring her pain with her? Just floored me. We thought maybe he had meant Cain, but asked him about it a little more and realized he meant what he asked. Kids, man. I was teaching in Korea when that tsunami earthquake hit Japan, and for the most part all the children, like the adults, were saying horrible things, like the Japanese deserved it and that they thought it was funny. Koreans hate the Japanese. Having been disappointed in all of my classes, I decided to ask my babies, 6-7 years, what they thought about it. Just the same, they started laughing and joking. Then the quietest little girl in my class stands up, and in her broken English she yells at her peers, telling them that those people who died had mommies and daddies too who loved them, and that we must be kind to others, etc. Blew my mind. You go, little girl, wish we had more people like you. At the zoo with little 7-year-old cousin, who asks why the giraffe didn't have any friends to play with, to which I replied he's quite tall, so the other animals might be scared of him. Cousin says, he looks sad, just because he's different doesn't mean he shouldn't be happy. Amazing. Discussing the saying easier said than done, I was thinking about exceptions, so I said except, trailing off in thought, and my brother said except talking. He's 8 years old. My brain is bouncing around in an infinite loop at this quote. We recently adopted a very elderly stray cat, though we didn't realize his age at the time, and unfortunately our time with him was very brief. I was dreading having to explain what had happened to my 5-year-old daughter, but she really surprised me after our long conversation. She said, Mommy, I think Buster came to us because he wanted to see nice people before going, like giving you bye-bye hugs and bye-bye sugars. He died about 2 weeks ago, and she goes over to the grave we dug him every day to talk to him. I explained to her he can't really hear her anymore, but she told me, I know, but it makes my tummy feel better. Okay, kid, talk to him as long as you want. And she does. She'll sit beside his little grave marker and pat it and tell him about her day, and when I say it's time to go and she'll say okay, gotta go. Loved you lots, bus. I was driving through my old neighborhood with my daughter when we passed a movie theater. I told my daughter, hey sweetie, do you see that movie theater there? I used to take mommy there when we were dating, although her name wasn't mommy then, of course. Why did mommy have a different name then, she asked. Sensing a teachable moment, I said, well, why do you think? What is it that makes a woman a mommy? Patience? I actually remember when I first learned that my parents had names other than mommy and daddy, completely blew my mind. I've posted this before, but it's fitting. When my now 12-year-old son was 6 or 7, he asked me why people die. His aunt had just passed. I clumsily tried to explain, not doing very well, when he says, so you mean, life is like a restaurant, and so people can sit down and eat. Other people have to finish and leave. Yes, son, it's exactly like that. Oh, crap. That's really well put. My niece running around being a 4-year-old. I hear a thud. You okay, mamas? Yes, I'm okay, uncle. Watch one stuff. What happened? She's getting up and dusting herself off. Gravity, sometimes I don't like it, then starts running again. When my niece was 7, she came running to me and said she need to tell me something. She kind of squinted her eyes in concentration and said, if fantasy were real life and real life were fantasy, fantasy would be kind of boring because real life is boring. So, I kinda like life the way it is. You know, then she went back to playing with her princess dolls. I am so proud of her deep thinking. She independently solved her existential crisis 5 minutes after developing one. Oh. This is not something I've heard firsthand, but it's a story my wife and my mother-in-law have told me. When my wife was 4 years old and her older brother was 7, they were out in the front yard riding their bikes when the neighbor's kids decided they should go down the road to a creek to release a captured frog, or turtle, or some such creature. Now the creek was well beyond the limits of where mom said they could travel on their bikes, where she could see them, and my wife had been instructed to listen to her brother, and her brother had been told that he was to look after his sister. So when he said they should indeed go to the creek to release the small green animal into a more inviting and lush habitat, she followed. Mom was not pleased. She drove down to the creek on a whim and found her lovely children where they should not be. Mayhem ensued and punishment was doled out with an iron, yet loving, fist. Stern talking tos were had, and since the brother was in charge of the sister, he was informed that he would be punished for both transgressions as his sister. Now my wife had only done as instructed, and upon doling out the verdict, the question, now what have you learned, was asked, and the answer, to never be responsible for anyone but myself. I was mopping my kitchen one day, nephew watching TV in the adjoining room. I remarked more to myself than him, I think all I'm doing is pushing dirt around. To which he replies, I think that's all anyone does. It struck me as rather cosmic and profound, that maybe that's all we're doing here on Earth. So I'm making a note of all these things to put in my Oscar-winning screenplay. Overheard this in the American Museum of Natural History. Father asked his 5-year-old daughter if she's interested in knowing where we came from. She immediately said, I am more interested in knowing how will we get back. I don't even think like this. I'm a teacher, and last year one of my adorable 6th grade boys walked up to me and said, Miss, I think the whole universe is made of magnets. I started to laugh at him, then realized what he had said, and stood there shocked. You go, kid. Keep thinking those thoughts. My ex-boyfriend's 4-year-old niece sat down and talked to me once. I'll never forget it. You know, I love you a lot. You make me really happy. I think you make him happy too. Why do you do things to make him happy? I asked her what she meant. Tried to explain to her as best I could that when you love someone you want them to be happy. Then she hit me with this. But no matter how happy you make him, he's still just not very nice to you. You need someone to be nice to you. Why do you love someone that can be so mean even when you aren't mean to them? You should find a nice boy to love. That is what would make me happy. And I love you and I want you to be happy. I cried. She cried too. She thought she said something wrong. It's funny how so many people said it to me, and it took a 4-year-old to get it through my head. When you're little, your underwear are pretty big. Then they get smaller and smaller as you get older, and then they start getting bigger again. My sister said that after asking why I wear underwear that doesn't cover my butt. The difference is when you're little, someone else is trying to make sure you're covered up, and when you're older, you're trying to make sure you're covered up. I have a friend who's a 50-year-old raver and frequently gets high around his 10-year-old daughter. We were at a private music festival where everyone's kids just run around unsupervised, and I saw his daughter sort of wandering around alone. I asked her, hey, does your dad know where you are? She thought about it a second before saying, no, but I know where he is. Or, I was playing COD 4 on Xbox on Veteran, trying to get all the achievements. This brought upon rage as you would have expected, so I shouted, ugh. This is stupid, it's not even fun anymore, and my little brother heard me. He walked up and said, why are you playing it? Half jokingly I said back, because I'm trying to get these points. Cool, what can we do with them? You could tell he was jabbing at me. Well, you see. Nothing. He didn't reply to that, and he left, allowing me to wallow in my wasted 6 hours, knowing full well what he had accomplished. He was 9. Haven't picked the game up since. Your little brother is a smooth operator. My gifted and talented advisor in elementary school had a young son. He was 3 or 4 when I was in 6th grade. We got to go on a behind the scenes tour of the zoo through the GT program, and she brought her son along on the trip. He was very fascinated with the penguins. He said, "I have so many questions for those penguins. They look like they have seen a lot." Nam was heck man. I took my little brother, he was 6ish, for his first snowboarding run on the big hill. While we were sitting at the top strapping in and waiting for everyone else, he looked around at the view and said, "Is this a dream? I didn't know things could look so beautiful." He still remembers that and says it's still his favorite part of the sport. 8 years later he is a kick-butt boarder. When dropping my son, 5 now, 4 at the time, at school, I told him I was going to miss him. He told me that I just need to think about him when I miss him, that it always makes him feel better. He also speaks very frankly about death, understands that it is imminent, and asks logical questions to the point where I am comforted by his ease. My sister asked my 4-year-old nephew why he lied to her. He came back with, "Because I had the opportunity to." Where do they get this crap? He also had the means and, possibly, the motive. My son introduces himself. "Hi, I'm Oliver the boy human. We are all humans." And I mean, where the heck did he learn that? But, you know, it's true. We're all humans. My son does something very similar. "I'm Camden. I'm a person." Sometimes he adds boy person to the mix. It started after me saying mom is not a jungle gym. I'm a person. We don't hang on people. When my son was age 5, he and I were talking about opposite words. Up, down, in, out, etc. When I asked about the opposite of evil, his response was happy. It opened my eyes. LOL, little hedonist. I was talking to my little brother about how sad I was when my dog died. He said, "But she's not like a star that burns for lots and lots of years. She was like a shooting star." And he went on to say she's going to have helped so many people, so it's not like she's gone. I asked what he meant and he said, "You loved her and she made you happy. And when you were happy you were nice to me. And that made me happy. So when you're nice to all the other people, when you're happy and making them happy, really it's her making them happy. All the people who didn't know her but are still affecting." Yes, I know. But that's what he said. By her. The light burns brightest that burns shortest. And dogs burn like the sun. There was a kid I knew that went to a Christian school but was aware of atheism. When he was asked what God was, he responded, "God seems to be the everything that is nothing." Whoa. I was in a car with my friend and his 4-year-old daughter not long ago. After a short silence, we hear from the backseat, "If there was no money, we'd all be free." After a long discussion about the depth of the statement, my friend and I assumed she may have meant everything would be free, but it did not come out that way. You're a freaking genius, Eva. I'm going to be that guy for a moment, but that's not entirely true. Money facilitates exchange, but it isn't necessary for it. Without money, we'd barter goods and services, and have a system much like the one we have now, but with much worse bookkeeping. My friend's little sister had an assignment in school where she can wish for one thing. She wished that nobody would hit. In my eyes, she basically wished for world peace. Haha. Your friend's little sister might be getting abused by someone. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you may want to look into it. My friend and I were teasing my son, who was 6 at the time, about wearing his Superman pajamas outside. He just sighed loudly, turned to me and said, "I hate the sound of grown-ups." I was having a conversation with my 7-year-old cousin a couple of months ago, and during a brief lull, she suddenly comes out with, "Why do people like to believe in God?" Honestly, I would have expected something like, "Is God real?" or something similar, since my family is pretty religious, and she's been taught to believe. I wasn't expecting her to question the purpose of faith. Needless to say, I was kind of gobsmacked. Several years ago, my dad was scheduled for a colonoscopy. There was a message for him on the answering machine from the anesthesiologist, asking for a call back. My niece, who was maybe 8 at the time, asked what kind of doctor that was on the machine. and I told her it was the doctor who puts you to sleep for the colonoscopy. Then she asked what a colonoscopy was, and I told her it's when they put a camera up your butt to check for cancer. The easiest answer. She looked at me for a second, thinking, then said, "Good thing they put you to sleep for that." My cousin married a young girl who wears a lot of makeup, has that weird skunk hair, wears tiny dresses. You get the drill. He asked my 10-year-old nephew at Easter if he thought his wife was pretty. My nephew said she's beautiful, but why does she hide herself behind all that makeup? Oh man. I am a preschool teacher, so I hear young kids say insightful things every day. One of my favorites was from a few weeks ago. A little bit of background knowledge. There's an entire book series about hypothetically giving animals food, if you'd give a pig a pancake, if you'd give a moose a muffin, etc. One is called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie and Then the Mouse Wants Some Milk to Go With It, and basically it results in all these other actions. It's a silly book about cause and effect. We've been reading these books, and one day my co-teacher asks this little Chinese boy in my class, "John, what happens if you give a mouse a cookie?" He responds, completely deadpan, he'll ask for another cookie. He wants 2 cookies. For some reason that comment has really stuck with me. I think it's an important reminder of how adults view consequences. If I do A, then B and C will happen, and how children tend to live completely in the moment. Gee, I got a cookie. I love those books. My mother was trying to tell my 3-year-old that bad people go to jail because they don't have God in their heart. He replied, "Number. They go to jail because they are bad. Simple. Smart." Me all happy after solving a difficult problem with the kids. I say to my 5-year-old, "See, there's a solution for everything," he says, "not death." My mom is a pediatrician and she told me that recently she had a very young patient in her office, maybe 3 years old. I guess they were just quietly going through the checkup and the girl looks up at my mom and says, "Your person." I know it's kind of silly, but I thought it was a very astute and deep thing for such a young child to say, essentially recognizing that she was not the only fully conscious being there was. Kind of a big concept for such a young mind. Or it was just babble. I dunno. Sounded cute nonetheless. My family and I were playing a game the other night. In this game a question is asked and everyone writes down an answer. The question, what is the worst part about being a woman? My 11-year-old sister wrote down men. Well, he's not wrong. If murder is very, very bad, then I can see how a kid would jump to people being the worst thing ever, since murder is a crime committed by a person. We should kill everybody so there'll be no more murder. My son is 3. A few weeks ago we were driving and he asked me, "Mama, why we are?" I asked him what did he mean and he said, "Why we here, on planet." I didn't know how to explain the meaning of life to my boy. My 4-year-old niece found a few baby bunnies in my parents' backyard one day. She wanted to make sure they were okay, so she suggested we bring them some baby carrots. Then she kicked a basketball at a garage door and it bounced back and knocked her down. Working in a school holiday care program, a girl was having trouble with her earrings and was upset. Her mum was a staff and came over to comfort her. One of the girl's friends, let's call her Sweetie because she is an absolutely gorgeous kid, came over and I asked if her friend was okay. The child laughed at something silly her mum did while I was asking and Sweetie commented that she was a cheeky monkey. I suggested going and telling her that to make her laugh and Sweetie just said, "I think she wants to be with her mum now." I commented that she was really good at thinking about other people's feelings as I had been watching her for a couple days now and was impressed at her empathy. Sweetie, "Yeah, I am good at thinking of mine too." Me, "That's just as important." Sweetie, "Yeah, you have to love yourself so other people, like mummy and daddy, can love you too." 5 years old and I will never forget her swinging on the back of a couch when she said one of the most insightful things I've ever heard anyone say. Apologies for any spelling and grammar. I am on my phone on lunch and about to go play with Sweetie and some other kids. As the story goes, my grandmother asked me what color a red stoplight was, because we were stopped at one. I was 2 or 3 I think, and I said yellow, and then she freaked out and thought I was colorblind or something. I told my mom a minute later is actually red. I guess I was trying to trick my grandma. my then 3-year-old nephew in the back of the car while I drove. Why do Legos have chairs? Why do they have chairs? I dunno, so they can sit I guess. But they don't have knees, so they could just sit on the floor. Oh my god. This kid's a savant. I was at a friend's house, helping with her kids. She looked out the window and said, "Oh, man, it's raining." Her 6-year-old son replied, "Eat a ham sandwich, it'll calm your nerves." I'm trying to explain stranger danger to my 3-year-old daughter. I say most people are good, but some are bad, and you can't tell by just looking at them. She looks at me with a look of complete understanding and says, "Yeah, just like robots." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.